Hey big brains, today we're getting nerdy and we're talking about cleat position, and it's more important than you think. I know, it doesn't sound super exciting talking about cleat position, but it really does change how your bike reacts to your body inputs. We're going to talk about that today and how I set up my cleats. There's a lot more to it than you think. Let's get started. So I just got a brand new pair of Clipless shoes and I'm trying to set them up to match my current ones. Both of these shoes are made by Crank Brothers, but this process works whether you have Crank Brothers shoes or SPDs or any cleat and any shoe. There is so much range of motion in cleat adjustment. I can move this a good 40 mil up and down. I can change the angle and I can even change the height by putting shims on it. And all of those things are going to change how your cleat interacts with your pedal, and they're going to change how your body interacts with the bike. Now, all of us have ridden flat pedals before, and the great thing about flat pedals is they allow you to put your foot at any angle, any position that you want. And that's important. Your body mechanics, your knees, maybe you have some injuries that don't allow you to be at a certain angle, or just your body dynamics or crank length, things like that. Having a flat pedal allows you to reposition to get the most comfort. It also allows you to reposition for control. A lot of people ride on the balls of their foot. This is an old carryover from road riding. They claim that there's more power transfer at the ball of your foot, and so people think more power equals faster, so I'm going to do that. But when you're balancing on your bike, this takes a lot of calf tension to keep your balance. If you put it in the middle of your shoe, you don't need to use your calves to hold your body up, and then you can focus more on using your calves for pushing and pumping and dipping. So there are pros and cons to both. I'm not going to try to tell you what you should be doing. That's up to you. You should be experimenting. That's what you should do. I run mine all the way back, more towards the middle of your shoe. That gives you better bracing on impact. That gives you better bike control for like pump tracks and dirt jumping and stuff. Now, it's personal preference. Do whatever you want. It doesn't really matter to me, but it's something to think about. And if you've never tried the other, if you've never tried moving this or on flat pedals, moving where you're standing, you need to try that and find out what works for you before you just hold fast to an opinion. Like I said, it will change your balance. As you slide your cleat back or your foot forward, you naturally put more weight on the front of the bike. So if your front wheel's washing, you're coming around corners and there's just not traction on the front and it's pushing, sliding your cleat back will naturally give you more forward bias on your bike, and you'll weight the bars and put more traction on the front. Let's pretend this is our rear axle. We got a short chainstay here effective to our ankles, but if I slide my cleat back, that distance just got longer, and that's going to make it harder to pop into manuals. That's going to make it feel like you're shifted forward on the bike. So that changes the bike handling. We don't talk about that nearly enough. Another important factor is the angle at which your foot sits on the pedal. You know, neutral is straightforward, totally in line with the bottom bracket, but some people are more duck foot. Most people walk with their toes out slightly more. If you do too much of this, you're going to get heel rub on your frame or your crank, but maybe your body needs that. In fact, there are some pedals that are introducing longer spindles for those that are more duck-footed, so that you can still pedal like this without your heels rubbing. SQ Labs is one of those companies. They believe in a wider Q factor because most people have more of a toe-out gait when they walk. So that's something to think about as well. Now, when you're on a clipless shoe, you're locked in, so you can't reposition that without taking off the bolts and moving it. And so that's why it's extra important to get your setup correct. On a flat pedal, it doesn't really matter. If you step on it, it's a little off. On the next corner, you can reposition and get it feeling right. You can slide it forward as much as you want. But cleat placement locks you into that position every single time, and you're developing muscle memory. If this is incorrect, you're going to get used to it being incorrect, and you're going to lose performance gains, and you might even hurt your body a little bit. So I always recommend getting things set up perfect on flat pedals. Check your angle. What I'll do is I will trace the flat pedal. Pretend this isn't a clipless shoe. I will actually trace it on the shoe and then take a look at it, and you'll see the outline, and I'll see what angle I'm usually at, what feels most comfortable for me. For me, I'm a little bit toe out, and so I have to rotate my cleats a little bit so that my knees aren't at an uncomfortable angle. Now, everybody's different. Everybody has different needs, so I wish I could just tell you what the best is for every situation, but that's not the case. Everybody's different. Still, it's really important to set this up correctly because you're going to do thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 revolutions in this position that this cleat locks you in, and you got to make sure it's good for your body, and you got to make sure it gives you the control that you want on the bike. So we've talked about forward and aft position a little bit. Let's see what's going on under here. Here we got our washer, our cleat, and our spacer. So in the shoe, we've got 2 sets of nuts that this can go into. You can pull that out and flip it. In the past, I've dremeled out my channels down here to go an extra centimeter or so to get my cleat even further back. When they interview all the enduro and downhill racers, maybe not all, but 90% of them, they run them all the way back for that mid-foot control. And so it makes me wonder, if we're running all the way to the limit, maybe we should just readjust and recalibrate and shift everything down. Maybe where we actually want to be is down here, but we'd never know because the shoes only stop here. I'd love to see a shoe manufacturer experiment with longer channels that we could play around with that. Just because we've been doing it this way forever doesn't mean it's the best. Here, Crank Brothers has this red line that they are calling the race zone. I think they're trying to get people to run their cleats back a little bit more. And I'm all for that. I think we should be running them further back. But a lot of people that race XC want them all the way up here toward the ball of the foot where you get the most power delivery, supposedly. There's also reports saying that you get better power delivery down here. So who knows? Crank Brothers just came out with this new cleat tool. This thing is awesome, and we're going to talk about this a lot today. I'm not affiliated with Crank Brothers. This is not a sponsored video. I just think they're doing some neat stuff. I saw one of these at the Sedona Mountain Bike Fest, and they're like, here, try it out. Let me know what you think. So this tool helps you set up all your adjustments. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to measure where my current cleat is, get some measurements, and try to transfer that to my new shoe. This tool works with SPDs, and it also works with Crank Brothers cleats. It works with a whole bunch of different setups. This tool does a few things. It gives you leverage to hold onto your cleat while you're tightening it. Sometimes without this, when you're tightening, this thing will shift and you can't quite get it just right. Especially if you're using these sole protectors or these shims, they tend to squirm even more than a typical cleat with these sunken spikes that sink into the shoe. So I'm going to pop this on here and I'm going to take some measurements because I really like where this cleat position is. I took a lot of time getting this set up. So we can see the cleat is slammed all the way to the back and it's kicked in just a little bit from center. And I'm running 0 spacers underneath it, but I'm gonna make sure that's correct on the new shoe. So the first thing we want to adjust is the cleat height. They've got these little spacers here to space it off of the shoe and raise the cleat. Now on a clipless pedal like the Mallet that has a platform around it, the sole of the shoe is actually designed to interface with these pins. And so if you space your cleat too low, you're never going to touch those pins and you're just going to be resting on these bars here. And if your cleat's too high, it can't clip in because the platform here is preventing the sole from sinking into where it needs to click. So this little thing here is a depth gauge. It's got setting 1, see there's 1 dot there, 2 dots there, setting 2, 3, and 4. And each of these have a different depth that show how far up or down your cleat is. Every sole of every manufacturer has a different height. And so you might need more shims on one shoe than another. It would be naive to say I never run shims on any of my shoes. I just run them all the way flat to the shoe. Well, since the tread height differs on each shoe, that means you're going to have different levels of interface and grip with your pedal. So what we're going to do is measure the height of the sole of this shoe. So we're going to start on setting 1. That's not touching. Then we'll move to the little 2 dots here. Still not touching. Try the 3 dots. Probably a 1 millimeter gap. So it's between the 2 and the 3. And then the 4 is the biggest gap. So if you look at the card that comes with the tool, they've got this little instruction setup guide. I'm going to link to this full video in the description so you can check it out. Now on Crank Brothers shoes particularly, you're going to see this match logo, and they've actually measured all the dimensions of their shoes and pedals, and they have a diagram that helps you know cleat setup for which shoe to match with which pedal. So both of these are mallet shoes. This is just the lace version and this is the boa version. So they're going to be the same. And when I look on their YouTube video for the mallet DH and the mallet E pedals, which are what I prefer, they recommend the gray shim, which is 1.5 millimeters thick. So that's great if you have mallet shoes, but what if you have someone else's shoes or someone else's pedals? How do you use this depth gauge indicator? There's a different chart for that. So this chart here, I was trying to find it online, but I can only find it on the video, tells you which dots you're using. We're at the 3-dot level. And so that recommends a cleat plus a 1.5 mil shim, the gray shim. They even have some notes on there about time attack pedals and SPDs, which is really cool of them. They didn't have to do that. They could have made it proprietary with only info about Crank Brothers. But they've tried to make this as easy as possible no matter which cleat system you're using. I'm going to try the cleat setup that they recommend, which is the gray shim. Now we've got a few other measurements to do here. We've got the fore and aft, which we're going to run it all the way back. Next, we're going to adjust the toe in and toe out, and we're also going to adjust the Q factor or the stance width. You can see here, plus or minus. If you want a closer stance and narrower Q factor, move your cleat that way. If you want a wider Q factor, move it out. Now I'm going to compare my marks on here with this tool. Another nice thing is this gives you more leverage to hold your cleat when you're tightening it. If you're trying to hold it without this, you have very little leverage, but often when I crank these down, they'll slip and rotate and I lose that anyway. So this little tool, I mean, Crank Brothers isn't making millions on this thing, but it just makes our lives a little bit easier. Okay, that's the angle I want. Make sure my width is correct. All of this will change the ergonomics of your body on the bike. It will change your knee angle while you're pedaling through it. If you have a bike fitter, they're going to take all of this into account. If you don't have a bike fitter, just go off of what feels most comfortable to you and how you ride with flat pedals. Oh, this is so nice. This is the first time in my life I've tightened these down without it slipping. This tool is so handy. There we go. We got our cleats in the exact same position on this new shoe. I may play with the shim height. I'm going to see how this feels interfacing here and make sure that I still get full contact with the rubber on there. I don't like up and down play. I don't like the pedal to rock like this. And so if I'm getting rocking or I get up and down play with my cleat, I will adjust that shim. We don't talk about shims enough. We don't talk about cleat adjustment. We don't talk about stance width or Q factor or the toe in or toe out measurement or the fore and aft measurement. And all of those things are so important. They affect how you interface with the bike. And I hope these are available at the time of release of this video. These are kind of a new thing when I got them. But for me, it's an absolute game changer to be able to set up all my cleats exactly the same between all my shoes. One other cool thing about Crank Brothers is they have different cleats that change the amount of float and how easy they are to clip in and out. I'll be experimenting with more of that in a future video, but today I just wanted to talk about setup and how that affects your body positioning on the bike. Well, thanks for getting nerdy with me. There's a lot that goes into cleat setup, and some of the benefits of clipless pedals, always clicking in consistently at the same time, can also be some of the biggest downfalls if your equipment isn't set up properly. So if you use a bike fitter, they're going to help you with all of these different things, but most riders that I come in contact with have never used a bike fitter and haven't given much thought to cleat height, sole of your shoe interface with the pedal, toe in and toe out. Usually, I'm surprised how many people say, oh, my thing came with cleats installed and I just ran how they were, assuming that was the best. We don't run stock handlebar width. We don't run stock handlebar roll. We don't run stock throw on our levers. All of that can be adjusted to our body to make the bike fit our body instead of making our body have a one-size-fits-all to the bike. So if you've never experimented with this on your cleats, please do so now. I'd love to hear what you changed and what difference it made and how you felt it. Thanks for getting experimental with me, and thanks for being nerdy. Take care.